There are many stories about monsters, and I do mean many. But have you ever actually stopped to think about what makes something a monster? Charybdis, Dracula, Grendel, and Slenderman, for example, they're all different, and yet they share some kind of fundamental quality. I suppose you could say you know one when you see one, right? But do you really? I mean, what's the shared ingredient connecting all of them? You could call dictators, zombies, murderers, and violent animals monsters. Some are orderly and well dressed, some are falling apart, and some are only acting on instinct. I think it's that they all have the capacity to easily harm the innocent that really gets to us, you know? I'd like to tell you about a particularly frightening monster. This one is different from what you find in a typical horror story, and for two reasons. The first is that it's completely senseless and barely even mobile. It doesn't think. It won't chase you or intentionally try to harm you at all, for that matter. It's blissfully unaware of your existence or even its own. It's just an idiot lying alone in a crushing blackness. At one single point in time, it lashed out in an act of violence. But ever since then, it lies almost perfectly still in the darkness, while people just try to forget that it ever existed. And today, it simply sits there, and even if you approach it, it won't try to flee or pursue you. It won't try to psychologically manipulate you, trick you, eat you, or anything that we often associate with monsters. It is much more dangerous than that. If you get too close to it, it will destroy you. You won't even notice that it's happening until it's too late. Now, the second thing to keep in mind is that it's real. Many scary stories claim to be true, but by the end of this one, you'll realize that I'm not lying. This monster is out there in the world right now. You probably don't believe me yet, but allow me the opportunity to convince you. But before we begin, let me give you a little background. Years ago, mankind created this monster with the idea that they would be able to contain it and use it as a source of energy. Thanks to carelessness and poor training, though, the experts lost control of it, and in return, it caused a massive explosion before escaping into the basement, where it waits to this day. Now, I can tell you how to find it yourself, but please don't actually try it. For starters, it is highly illegal. It was originally created by humans, and the powers that be will not appreciate you looking for it. Anyone going on this journey will almost certainly be caught and arrested, and they will be the lucky ones, facing only a fine and a stint in prison. Look, these laws are in place for your own protection, alright? Those who make it through will face almost certain death, as the monster shreds their body to pieces before they've even realized it. Now tell me, how much are you willing to risk for the sake of your own curiosity? Anyway, there are two options for getting close. I recommend the more difficult route, as your chances of success are higher. You're gonna have to travel to a remote village and take a lonely hike through the wilderness and into the desolation. I suggest stocking up on backpacking and camping supplies, and enough food to survive for a couple of days outside. You'll also need a flashlight because there's no lighting inside of its lair. Now, if you don't want to hike, you could just book a tour. Of course, profiteers sell tours of the area surrounding it. It killed many people and chased thousands more from their homes, and now there are tours. People can be hard to understand sometimes. But then again, on the other hand, how different is that from your own curiosity? Well, at any rate, I don't recommend a tour. They won't take you close enough to see it for yourself, and if you try to sneak away from the group, the authorities will be alerted to your disappearance and you'll be caught, so just stick to the lonely hike. When you arrive at the starting point, you'll find yourself in a small city of about 10,000 people near a river. They call it a city, but it's more like a modest town. This is the last populated outpost before you journey north into the realm of the beast. There are a few tiny villages ahead, but they're extremely small and remote. There are no more major roads. So I think your best chance is to get to this city and proceed on foot from there. Nearly everyone who used to live further north fled in terror, abandoning their homes and possessions in the process. Many didn't escape quickly enough and perished shortly afterwards. So from the city, you'll need to head northeast. There's a dirt road that will take you through a few villages, and at this point in the trip, you still aren't technically trespassing. And that being said, you look out of place and arouse suspicion. You could alternatively try following the riverbank, taking cover in the shallow part, or head straight north and then east across fields. The lack of humans has allowed the animal population to flourish. Be careful of wolves. I'll let you figure which way makes the most sense to you. That's mostly up to you. Just figure it out. But as long as you travel in that general direction, you'll eventually reach a barbed wire fence and several warning signs marking the outer perimeter. This is the threshold. Now, the fun begins. You'll need to sneak across the barbed wire. From here on, you'll be arrested on sight. The fence will be watched, but beyond it, the wilderness is punctuated with abandoned villages and other signs of decay. This will go on for miles. You should be able to find cover there. Now, it may be wise to wait until dark to cross the fence and move on, because the cover of darkness will help you move undetected. At this point, you might want to consider taking your time. People pay good money to see the devastation, and rarely does anyone get to explore unescorted. Just make sure you don't linger for too long, because you're now within the monster's sphere of influence, although at this distance it's still fairly weak. You probably didn't notice yet, but it's already beginning its work on you. You need to travel east after crossing the barrier. If you begin to see blood-red petrified trees, you're starting to get close. The monster destroyed the trees in its outburst and caused them to petrify in this unnatural color. Only a few remain, as most others have fallen. Your demise won't be as glamorous, by the way. Eventually, through the murky darkness, you should be able to discern a large man-made lake with a mostly abandoned city on its northwestern shore and an industrial site further off in the distance. It may be a little hard to spot in the dark. Head for the city streets, but remember to be discreet. There are a few people here, mostly government-approved workers. Some of them are working on the construction of a solitary new building, and others are there to arrest people like you. They rotate in and out, never spending more than a few hours in the city. Trust me, you wouldn't want to live there. If you take the time to poke around, you'll find the abandoned buildings full of relics from the past. While the workers still spend limited periods of time here, a lot of the city is frozen in a bygone era, with possessions dropped where they were when the masses fled. But this isn't why you came this far, is it? No, it's time to get serious. Further north and east, on the horizon, it sits, a silhouette on the black horizon. This is the partially built confinement building. The arches are intended to keep the monster within. Humanity's first attempt at such confinement was an abysmal failure. The second attempt was a decade behind schedule, and the construction is being threatened by recent armed conflict that has erupted nearby. If you're still serious, you need to ignore all of this. Hey, you wanted to see it, alright? Your objective lies within the half-built structure ahead. I suspect some of you listening have already figured out where it is by now. And they're not likely to be comforted since it's become apparent that I'm telling the truth. I implore you to turn back now, because it only gets worse. Instead, at this point, you're probably thinking that you gotta get inside the dome without being spotted and how you're going to do that. Well, to be honest, I have no advice here. But the authorities don't really monitor it constantly, so it may be possible to pull this off. The dome is designed to keep the monster inside, and unsurprisingly, it's not intended for easy entry and exit. You'll have to survey the situation for yourself. If you somehow manage to get in, you'll see before you the original confinement structure, cheerfully referred to as the sarcophagus. Notice the holes in the wall and the caved-in ceiling, evidence that this thing refuses to be confined. The roof collapsed years ago, and even before that, the numerous holes in the walls rendered the entire structure ineffective. Gaining entry from here shouldn't be too difficult, and at this point the authorities won't be a problem unless you were spotted climbing into the dome. Rarely do people get this close. The monster's effect on you is growing now. If you've made it this far, your chances of survival have decreased. It's already destroying you. Anyway, moving on. Perhaps descending directly from the tall smokestack of the sarcophagus is the best way to get your bearings. The wreckage inside is immense and will make maneuvering kinda difficult. The fallen metal beams are all around, with narrow and unstable walkways in between them. Further collapses of the inner structure are still possible, so proceed with extreme caution. You need to go to the center of the structure and then descend. There's a large pit several meters away from the base of the smokestack. The monster lies directly under it, but I recommend not crawling straight down through the pit. Instead, try to get at it from the side. Find a collapsed bit of floor to crawl into the dark basement. There may even be an access shaft or stairs available. Beyond that, the beast is waiting for you. You're very close now. I hope you remember to bring that flashlight because it's the only way to see. The electricity doesn't work in here. Take a look around at the halls and the inside of the moldering basement tunnel. Have you kept your orientation? With the smokestack behind you and the pit in front of and above you, just proceed down the hall. You'll arrive at a corner. Now, pause here and take a breath. The monster is just around that corner. Take another breath. You're about to see something that many people aren't even aware exists. Are you sure you're ready to go on? Well, then, proceed. You'll see another hallway with the same dingy walls and no sign of a monster. The only thing out of the ordinary will be a rounded lump that appears to be partially liquefied rock oozing from the back wall. It'll seem almost alien. Go ahead and get close. Reach down and touch it. It should feel warm. You've found it. This is the monster. And at this point, you should ask yourself, what madness drove me to travel here? This monster is most commonly known as the elephant's foot. Sometimes it's called Medusa because looking at it means almost certain death. It barely moves. It won't pursue you or try to psychologically manipulate you in any way, like I said before. But tearing through the fabric of the universe itself, it's destroying the cells of your body from within. It's considered by many to be the most dangerous object in the world. If you turn and run immediately, if you find a hospital, you may still survive. But at this point, it's very unlikely. Within a half an hour, you'll begin to feel nauseous and start to vomit. And within hours, you'll have a headache, diarrhea, and a fever. You're probably already feeling weak, fatigued, and disoriented. Your hair will fall out and your skin will burn. You now belong to the beast, and it'll claim you within a few weeks. I really hope it was worth it. Oh yeah, I mentioned before that it barely moves, but it actually does move, very, very slowly. It's still melting into the earth through the concrete underneath it, and if it melts down onto the groundwater, it could once again unleash its destructive force. It could render the water supply deadly or maybe cause another explosion. It could spew more of its damaging essence into the atmosphere. Its wrath may not yet be spent. This monster still poses a danger, and ignoring it is not an option for us. But you're not really there. You didn't really go on this journey. You're still sitting safely at home or a local coffee shop, miles and miles away from it. However, as I said at the beginning, this monster is different. It's out there in the world right now as you listen to this, just sitting there senseless in the dark. Now, a few people have actually seen it in person and even been photographed with it, and they're all dead. The images in the photographs, they come out distorted and ghostly, almost as if they've been manipulated by software or something. But these are the actual images as they come out on film. It's the effect that the radiation has. Curious? Well, go ahead and research it for yourself. You'll find that it's all true. All of this really happened in 1986 in a city called Chernobyl.